Hello, and welcome to part two of a walking tour through the Bible. Still on the book of Genesis, naturally. And I'm Father Alexander Lucie-Smith, and this is St. Peter's Hove. Welcome. The Bible is a book. The Bible is a collection, I think, of 72 or 74 books. This is what the Bible looks like, okay? That's the Jerusalem Bible in the modern cover. I'm not making any special claims for the Jerusalem Bible, it just happens to be the Bible I was brought up on when I was a little boy at school. This is the Bible they gave us, this is the Bible I read, this is the Bible I'm familiar with. There may be other translations, there certainly are, but there may be other better translations. I'm not making any claims for this translation above other translations. But the Bible is a book in the sense that physically it's a book, it's one thing. It's a big book, but it's a book. And one of the things that books make claims just by being books, that first of all, there's a beginning, a middle, and an end. A book is coherent. At least most books are coherent. There are some really great books that are totally incoherent, such as Finnegan's Wake, by James Joyce, which is trying to point us to something very important about life. But generally speaking, books are coherent. The opposite end to Finnegan's Wake, you've got something like Murder on the Orient Express by Agatha Christie, a perfect work of art in which everything is explained at the end. All the disparate parts are in fact shown not to be disparate after all. They're shown all to have had a very important part to play. They all fit together perfectly well at the end. There's a beautiful solution. Justice is done, justice is seen to be done. There's a coherence to life. We love detective stories because they give us the impression that life is coherent. Some people would say they give us a misleading impression that life is coherent. Life isn't really like that. As a matter of fact, life is coherent. If you're a Christian, you strongly believe life is coherent. Life has meaning if we could but find the meaning, and we seek the meaning of life in a relationship with God. That is what being a Christian is about. Life is fundamentally coherent, and it's full of elements that may seem disparate but can be brought together. I just want to talk about the first two words of the Bible. Now, of course, one of the problems with biblical criticism is people get stuck on words. I remember the worst moments of my life were spent in the Gregorian University in Rome, listening to a very boring lecturer discussing whether there was a comma in that sentence in St. Paul's letter to the Colossians or not, because this changed the meaning of the sentence. Really boring. But we start off in the book of Genesis with the words, in the beginning. And of course, St. John's Gospel also starts with that phrase, in the beginning. And let's just ask ourselves, what? Was there a beginning? Yes, there was a beginning. So there was a time before the beginning, and indeed there was a time when there was nothing. There was nothing. In the beginning, God created heaven and earth. Now the earth was a formless void, and there was darkness over the deep, with a divine wind sweeping over the waters, or a divine spirit sweeping over the waters. Here we get a question of translation, because the actual word for wind in Hebrew, ruch, is in fact also the word for spirit or breath, the divine breath over the waters. In the beginning, all this had a beginning. Now, this is quite revolutionary because the ancient Greeks and the ancient Romans did not believe the world had a beginning. They believed the world had always been there, and that material things changed shape, changed form, assumed new, if you like, combinations, but matter was eternal. But we don't believe that. Everything began with God. There was a beginning. And of course, it's strongly implied, I think it's obvious, if there's a beginning, there's also an end. In other words, it starts and there will be, well, end isn't quite the word we're looking for. There'll be a conclusion. Everything will be brought together. Everything finally will make sense. And then, of course, that means between the beginning and the end, there's a middle. And who's in the middle? We are in the middle, making the story with God. Now, we get to the authorship of this. Who's writing this book? Well, it's written by various human beings who are inspired by the divine breath, inspired by the Holy Spirit, by the divine wind sweeping across the waters. They put their thoughts and feelings into human words, but they're moved by a divine spirit as they do it. We too are trying to make sense of our lives, but we are hopefully inspired by a divine spirit. We are natural human beings in this world, inspired by a divine spirit. in the beginning. It starts with me, it starts with you, and we are called to cooperate with God, to create something special, to co-create with God. God is the creator. We are his collaborators in the world. There's quite a lot in that first phrase, in the beginning. It is quite, sorry, somebody's just on the phone. It's quite inspiring, I think we can say. Now, what is the first chapter of the book of Genesis about? Well, it's about the creation of the world in 7 days. Okay, fine. Are we literally supposed to believe that God created the world in 7 days? We know this story, the first chapter of Genesis. Well, it's actually about God imposing order on the formless void, and it's also about God resting on the seventh day. In other words, God created the world. He created the stars. He created the moon and the sun. He created actually something else. He created the calendar. This is actually about the calendar that God created. He gave us 7 days a week, and he said you must rest on the seventh day. So this actually, the author of this passage is usually called the priestly document. It was a priest who wrote this, and he wanted to show God created the calendar, and God created, as part of the fabric of creation, God put into creation this commandment to rest on the seventh day. And indeed, my Jewish friends once pointed out to me the greatest thing the Jewish people ever gave to humanity is this idea: every day, every 7 days, you need a day off. And that's true. And why not 6? Why not 8? Why not 10? Some civilizations have had a 10-day week. 10's too long. 7. There's something natural in our biological rhythms that demands a 7-day, 1 day off in 7. So God and the world are not at odds. God and the world are in harmony, and the harmony between God and the world is seen in the law of God, which says, remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. So what this person is doing, the priest who's writing here, is illustrating in a story about the creation the way that God's law is written into the fabric of creation. He's also pointing us to something important. The more you look at the world, the more you'll see that it is God's world, and it is a world that reflects the glory of God. The same person who wrote this probably wrote, or was close to a person who wrote, or certainly had the same idea as a person who wrote that famous psalm, I think it's number 18, it says, the heavens proclaim the glory of God. The firmament shows forth the work of his hands. Okay, that's part 2 of our walking tour through the Bible. Do have a look at Genesis chapter 1. All the very best. See you again soon. Bye.